Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Searching for Political Identity, the show where I talk to thought leaders from diverse backgrounds and try to figure out if I'm going to keep voting for Democrats or if I'm going to vote for Democrats in November like I always have uh, since I've been eligible to vote. My voting history is Obama, Clinton, Biden. And so what am I going to do? I just went to law school. We just had the Trump experiment, COVID. I studied critical race theory. So a lot to think about. And the guest that I just spoke to, who you're about to hear from, was a phenomenal guest. He's a lawyer from California who's running for U.S. Congress right now. And he actually won in his primary race. He, what do you call it, advanced into the general election. So I talked to a candidate that didn't actually lose. That's pretty cool. Great guy, great conversation. The main theme of it, I guess, was this idea that we are so tribal today, and someone who tries to be objective in this environment where there's such a lack of objective reality and analysis, you get labeled as conservative, even though you might not be conservative. So, a really good conversation for this concept of uncovering political identity. What does it mean to be conservative? What does it mean to, if you're against surgery, gender reassignment surgery on kids who are under 18? Does that mean you're anti-trans? You're transphobic? So all of these conversations. We went for an hour and 15 minutes because we just flowed so well. And he told me so many great stories about his life and tied it into why he's running for Congress. But there was also so much that we didn't get to. So we agreed that we're going to speak again. Fantastic conversation. So Daniel Martinez, thank you so much for joining me. And people, please, if you like what he had to say, go to Dan Martinez, the number 4, Congress.com. He is running as a Republican, but he's outside of this two-party system in the sense that he doesn't have support from the big players because they know he was a former libertarian his whole life and that he's really trying to do something different. He's not going to just play the game. So if you like what he has to say, please support him because he could use your help. And with that said, that's about all the introduction I have for this episode. Daniel was awesome. And this podcast is awesome. For me, I'm having a lot of fun. If you're one of the few people who follow me closely, you know that I'm doing a lot of live streams lately. And that's like my new solo episode. Years ago, I'm talking like 3 years ago when I started, I used to do solo episodes when I couldn't find a guest. Now I'm really having no problem finding guests, and I haven't really been doing solo episodes, but lately I've been doing these morning live streams 2, 3, 4, even 5 times a week, and I'm enjoying that. So expect more of it. Kind of gets me an opportunity to connect with you a little bit, tell some funny stories, hopefully, and just build up an amazing audience. So that's what I'm doing. We're buzzing over here at Searching for Political Identity Studios. We're so excited that we can't even speak in complete sentences. So thank you for being here, folks. Enjoy this conversation, and I'll see you next time. Later. Mr. Martinez, it's a pleasure to have you. Thanks for spending some time with me this morning.
Good morning, Brian. Pleasure to be on.
Great. So you went to USD Law School?
Yeah, I went to USD. I was undergraduate class of 2006. I got a degree in psychology, minors in philosophy and history, and then I stuck around for law school. I had a chance to go up to Santa Clarita, but when they were sending out the admissions letters, Santa Clarita had just gotten off 40 days and 40 nights of nonstop rain, and San Diego is beautiful.
No doubt. Yeah, it's a beautiful campus. I graduated in 2022. I went in 2018. I did the night program because I was working my construction job, which I still have. I got a little restless on site and was fortunate to get myself into USD, and I had an amazing time. I mean, I loved every class except Civ Pro. The campus is beautiful.
Yep.
People are beautiful. So it was quite an experience for this Jew from the East Coast to be going to this Roman Catholic private law school, but it was just amazing. Did you enjoy law school?
I did very much. My method of learning is through communication with other people as opposed to reading. Like, I'm one of the people whose law school books were still in their plastic by the time I graduated. But there was something about the experience there. I have lifelong friends that are still from the school, and then every time I head down to San Diego, if I can, a lot of the law students don't understand the beauty of the full USD campus. But there's some beautiful spots where you can see all of Mission Bay. You can watch the planes landing and taking off at San Diego Airport. It was just
Yeah, if I could go back, I would have probably utilized the campus more. But that's the case with everything I do.
yeah.
Really, is like I'm kind of always in a state of partial regret. Like, oh, I could have done so much more with that opportunity. But nonetheless, it was a great opportunity, and so it sparked this podcast for me. Actually, well, first I want to ask you: was there a class or subject that you found most interesting, or did you just like everything like I did?
Well, so it was pretty wild. So I was young when I went to law school. Like I was 24 when I graduated. My birthday's in July. So I took that was the summer of bar prep. So I was a young 25-year-old attorney when I passed the bar.
Wow.
So I can't say that I knew exactly what I was getting into because I was pretty young in undergrad, and then I went straight off into law school. What I had missed this is honestly the most memorable thing about law school was in my undergraduate, I had missed the opportunity to study abroad. And then in my first year of law school, I was in the top 10% of my class. I got a summer associate at Dorsey and Whitney for the 2L summer. So I was making decent money. And so I convinced USD to let me study abroad in the first half of my 3L year in Spain.
Oh,
and the beauty of that was the courses in the ISADE, which is the law school out in Spain, didn't begin until October 25th-ish. And at USD, the classes begin in August, late August, early September. So that extra period of time in transition was traveling abroad, like backpacking through Europe while my friends were in the library of their last year, right? So, and then, so that was probably one of the most memorable things. It wasn't even at USD.
beautiful.
The other wild thing that happened while at USD, though, was I graduated in 2009, and the economy fell through the floor in 2008. So even though I had the summer associate position, they were retracting summer associate positions. The market, when the big companies get crushed in the market, one of the first places they start cinching up their belt. One of the places you cinch up your belt is with your law firms. How do the law firms cinch up your belt? Well, when you have these recent associates that are billing out at $250 an hour for work that's not really necessary to have an attorney do, you start cutting back on your labor force. You start cutting back on Big Law had fired about 20% of their existing lawyers at that point. So you go to graduate, and then the market's flooded with 20% of Big Law looking for different jobs. My grades were, I wasn't able to compete with individuals that had 7 years experience, clerkships, all of those issues. But for mid-tier firms, my grades were too good because they thought that I would spend 2 years with them, get experience, and then take off to go to the big guys. And then for the public interest, public defender, district attorney type positions, you have people that have been interning there for their 1L summer, their 2L summer, and they have those types of connections. So I found myself in a uniquely unemployable position. So after I came back, finished up my final semester, took bar classes, took the bar, ended up going to Thailand for 100 days.
Amazing.
Well,
Son of a gun. You lived this amazing life of such and keep going, but you're so present, to do all that stuff, which is amazing. So go on.
Yeah, well, so I mean, I just looked around and it was like everybody was on campus pulling their hair out. Everybody's stressed because there's no jobs available. They're just kind of almost like holding their knees, shaking back and forth. So I'm like, I don't really want to be here. I'm just gonna the results don't come back until November. I can't really get a job. I still have 20 grand in my account from the previous summer, right? So where can I stretch this, right? Because the studying abroad in Europe was super pricey at the time. The pound was. Anyway, so I decided on Southeast Asia because the cost was pretty low, and I looked at this. I ended up seeing this picture of these temples in Bagan, Bagan, which just looked stunning. And I was like, I'm gonna go there. I didn't realize it was in Burma and Myanmar.
Mm.
And so, but I flew out to, I started my trip in Europe, went out with one of my buddies who's an expat in the United Kingdom. We took his car by ferry over to Calais in France. And then we spent 2 weeks just driving around Europe, had some friends meet up with us. I mean, just went through Germany, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, dropped off a friend's along the way, and then ultimately I got on a flight to Southeast Asia to head to Vietnam. When I landed in Hong Kong, I realized that the visa that was in Vietnamese, they had made a mistake on it. They put the month and the date backwards. So I was denied. So I was denied entry. So I entered Hong Kong, but I wasn't able to board the flight to Vietnam. So I had a forced 3-day layover, which was great because I'd never been to Hong Kong.
Right.
And then, and then I ended up meeting my girlfriend at the time, who also went to USD Law, out in Thailand. Out in Vietnam. And then we did a couple weeks in Vietnam. Then we went down. A typhoon came in, so we just hopped on a flight to Bali. Like the flights down there are $60 when you're there. And so then she had to go back home, and then I went to Thailand myself. On the island of Koh Phangan, I found there was a hut on the beach. When I say hut, I mean, say, 12 feet by 12 foot room, 20 feet from the water. I paid extra for hot water in the room, private bathroom, large bed, air conditioning, and I was paying $10 a night. Like it was cheap. It was cheaper to travel there than it was to pay my rent back in San Diego at the time. So,
Unbelievable.
yeah, so I was just you rent a scooter for $1 or $2 a day, like a Vespa, like a knockoff Chinese Vespa type, but and then you go down to the market, get pad thai for $1. Like you see them catch the shrimp in the morning, like jumbo shrimp, and you get like 5 coconut crusted shrimp for $1.50. It was just, I mean, it was wild. I ended up doing that entire that 100-day trip in for about $8,000 or something like that. Airfare, everything included. And then I came back and everybody's hair was still like everybody's still pulling their hair out. Like nothing had changed. Like the economic conditions aren't going to change that quickly.
That's crazy. That's such an amazing thing that you did for yourself. I mean,
USD used to have me do I used to do all of the, when they bring the incoming students? They give them tours.
Yes.
At first, they weren't pleased with me for wanting to study abroad because kind of the thing about it is when you do a program that's not that's not within their like approved list, the school doesn't get the money. So for that semester, they didn't get their tuition. The tuition went through other institutions. So they weren't huge fans of that. But once I did it anyway, they used me to talk to incoming students to tell them about how flexible the school was to allow them to do all these different types of opportunities. So
how interesting.
And also since I was there for 7 years, USD has such like an important place in my heart.
Wow. What an incredible experience. Yeah, my parents offered to send me to Europe backpacking for 3 months after college, and I just go work right for my uncle, like I'd been doing my home. It's just awful. So good for you.
And the thing is, so just to put the feather in the cap for that story, right? So I started off in Europe, then I flew to Hong Kong, right? Imagine yourself going around the globe. And then after I'm in Southeast Asia, I ended up flying back home from Japan. Right. So I never went back the way that I came. I just did the full circumnavigation around the world. And I found that actually changes like your perception of the planet. Right. There are people who feel that Italy is really, really far away. Right. Or Australia is really, really far away. But once you do the circumnavigation, you start to realize the world's not really it's not really as large and as people believe it, or people feel that it is. It reminded me of, I forget which astronaut coined the term, the overview effect. That there's something that happens that when you head to space,
right,
and you see all of the planet in one frame, you start to see all human beings on the planet as interconnected.
In one frame, in one view.
We're all it's all one organism, as opposed to, oh no, we've got Americans over here and we've got Russians over there and we've got to murder each other. Like it's a very different vantage point when you're looking at it from abroad.
Didn't William Shatner, I think with Jeff Bezos last year, or maybe even a little longer than that, take a trip into orbit? And I think Shatner gave this profound quote about being hit with an overwhelming sense of sadness. Interestingly enough, for some reason, that overview effect hit him with profound sadness. I think it was because he had that feeling, and then he thought about all the division and all the strife, and it just really bummed him out. And I think he's like towards the end of his, he's older now, and so I just think he was really reflecting on his own life as well. So that must be quite a thing. Wow. So how did that change the course of your life when you came back?
I caught the travel bug. I've been to, my country counts presently at 45, 46. My ex is a flight attendant for American Airlines. So if you're somebody who likes to travel, find somebody who works for the airlines, right? Because there was a good 10, 12 years of my life where I could hop on a plane without booking a ticket. I have a little app that lets me see if there's any open seats. Right. If there's an open seat in first class, you can take it. So if you want to hop over to Europe, and you can just get on a plane and fall asleep and wake up in Europe after having a good meal, that's not a bad way to spend your time.
Not at all. So is America the best country in the world? How would you answer that?
Well, how do I put this? In order to appreciate what you have to see places. You have to experience absence of it, right? Like if I were to ask you, are you in a room that's dark right now? You need a point of relativity. Like if you walk into a closet, right, that has no lights, you close the door, your room right now probably seems really bright. But if you're coming from outside in the sun, the room you're in probably seems really dark, right? You have to have a point of relativity to be able to appreciate anything. So the first things that I started to realize when I was traveling was it made me appreciate the United States infinitely more, because for the first time I had a point of reference to compare things to, right? Like we talk about poverty in the US compared to the poverty in Cambodia, not even remotely close, right? So there were times where I started to get to the point where I land in LAX, and you almost feel the feeling to like kiss the ground, because it's the land of it's your land. And going to law school, like getting deep into like the constitutional structure of the United States, there is something unique about the United States, where this grand experiment that for the first time, instead of, because the European systems were or originated from divine right of kings, right? God chooses the member who's going to rule for the state, and God chooses the Pope who's going to rule for the church, et cetera, right? Then you have the French Revolution that removes the king, the monarchy, but replaces it with the state, right? It's still divine, and it's still top down from God to state, and then from state to people. So fundamentally, human beings have to ask for permission from the state to do something. Well, our founding fathers saw the abuses of that system as well as the system that preceded it, and said, why don't we try something completely different? Why don't we set the default position that you can do it naturally through your humanity? And then the government's the one that has to have a reason before it infringes. And we're losing sight of that. But that is the singular difference that makes the United States different than any place on the planet. What's allowed us to become what we are today.
Beautifully said. And so I was going to ask you, what is your political identity? But it sounds like you're a classic liberal. It sounds like you're a guy who respects the Constitution and would support reasonable policies that don't violate the Constitution. So that might make you a conservative, because so many progressives today don't care about the structure that you just laid out and see much more important the ends that they have in sight rather than by any means. So like, But hey, if you got to trample on that structure, trample on it. And so, how would you answer that question? What is your political identity?
So, as much as possible, I'm as post-tribal as really exists. We can get into that in a bit, but my education was classically liberal, like straight from Socrates, Plato, classical liberal, right? Which is very different than like postmodern progressivism. But I was in religious institutions my entire life. I went to an evangelical Christian school until 8th grade, and then I moved into Catholic schools for high school, undergraduate, and graduate school. And one of the things I noticed about religious institutions is they're pretty honest about, on list one over here, we have core curricula, right? Core curricular math, reading, science. These are things that you have to know, right? Then on this list over here, we have philosophy, religion, theology. We keep the two separate and distinct, but we're going to teach you both of them. Public school used to be core curricula only, and then no philosophy, theology. It was like the separation of church and state. Now there has become a fusion of a form of ideology into the public school system. I mean, this is just objective observation.
We're talking about wokeism.
Wokeism, like if you're going to fly a flag that's different than the United States flag or state flag, or in a classroom, I mean, that's just an ideology.
That's politics, right?
But no, but it's an ideology,
right?
Like if you replace that flag with a Christian flag or a Jewish flag or a Muslim flag, right? And you said you can only have one of those flags because all of the other ones are in conflict. You would say you'd think that you're at a Christian school or a Jewish school, right? We're living under this fiction where you can have that type of ideological imposition, but even worse. When I was at the religious institutions, they were completely honest about it. They said, this is your core classes, and then when we're over here, we're talking about Christianity, we're talking about Jesus, we're talking about this type of stuff. But there was a distinction. It wasn't when you're learning about math, you were saying like, well, this is how Jesus feels about math. I mean, we're infusing Jesus into the math, and it's like, if you don't, like if math is anti-Christian or something like that. Like
Right. So the critique you're laying on the public education system right now is that not only is there this probably harmful ideology, we can talk about whether there's some merits to it to being discussed in law school. I can tell you all about my experience studying it at USD. But not only is it there and harmful, probably, but that they're being dishonest about it. And they're saying, no, we're not doing it.
Exactly. The thing is that I actually have no problem with teaching philosophy and theology, as long as you're teaching philosophy and theology, honestly.
Right.
And also, by definition, if you're doing those things in a state school, they have to be elective. And again, you went to law school, you're a lawyer. It's like once you open up the state forum for one form of ideology, then you have to open it up for all of them, right? It's like if a school wants to allow there to be a Christian club, I mean, a public school wants to allow there to be a Christian club, then the kid in the class who says, hey, I want to have a Church of Satan club, right?
And this is where people on the right who maybe tend to be white and Christian start crying about, excuse me, I don't mean to say the word crying, but complaining about discrimination. And people are like, what are you talking about? And this is what they're talking about. They're saying, hey, I couldn't do with my Christian flag or my Christian beliefs what they're doing with their beliefs pertaining to LGBTQ, whatever it is. So this is not fair. And so, interesting. One of the questions I have about our country right now is secularism and removing the religious from the classroom. That's all well and good, I guess, but it's the fact that we've let this other thing in there. It's just not. That's not right.
Well, it's like pick your path, right? It's like if you want to have all flag, if you want to open the forum to all flags, then you open it to all flags, right? And then you're going to have a Christian flag next to the pride flag.
Yeah.
If you want to close the forum to all non-governmental flags, do that too, right? Like that. If you want to keep the Christian religious ones out, right? You can do that, but you have to keep all of them out. The problem's always been if the government ever says this one flag, that's it. and everybody else is wrong. Everybody else is evil. Everybody else needs to have the power of the state used against them in order to make it so this is this like safe space for this one true message, like the one true God, right? That's dangerous.
Damn right is. Wow.
So, and look, I mean, I'm a bit sensitive to this because my parents are from Chile, right? They emigrated here in '78 legally, but it was a dictatorship. It wasn't a dictatorship when they were born. I mean, it became one when they were in college. And one part of the reasons why they chose California was because they thought California was the place more than anywhere else on the planet that authoritarian tendencies would be unlikely to take root, right? And so then, like I mentioned before, that I caught the travel bug when I was in college, right? Then I ended up going to 45 different countries, and quite literally in 20, where's it? The weekend before all of the airports closed. I had flown to Australia to see a band that I like play, right? And when I got there, it was Sydney. It was wild. The downtown Sydney was empty, like the boardwalk, zero people. And then 4 days later, they shut down the airports, and then Australia turned into like wicked lockdown. Within California, there was when you return to it, right? When you return to essentially what happened was I had been traveling every couple of months since I was 25, and then all of a sudden my wings are clipped, and I'm stuck and I'm like trapped in my home state. And I start looking around, right? And look, I met my wife at Burning Man, right? So because people start to think that I don't know when I became the most conservative person in the room. It's a wild thing for me. Nobody really understands. Like
That's
nobody's
very
known.
Interesting. Go on. This is very interesting, actually.
That's what I'm saying. It's like my friends who've known me for a long time, will like send me text messages. They'll be like, "Republican?" They're like, "You?"
Right.
And I'm like, look, it's like I met my wife at Burning Man, right? So it's 2019, and so it's like I am on trait openness, like personality trait. I'm in the 99th percentile, right? But now I'm back at home, right? And then I'm having a conversation with somebody who I've known for a while, right? And my friends have had kids, so I asked them how's little Billy doing? Right? He's probably to be like 11, 12 years old now. I haven't seen him since he was 5 or 6. Like, how's everything going? He's like, oh, he's doing well, but doesn't like us to call him Billy anymore.
Oh no.
Like, wants us to call him Sarah. And I'm like, I'm like, don't worry about it, man. Like, it's not a big deal. Don't make a big deal out of it, and it won't be a big. And it's a phase. Like, I wanted blue hair when I was 15. I ended up getting a job. Couldn't get it because the job never happened. Right. Like when you like at that age, you have trouble forming long-term plans. Right. So just say yes in some capacity, but put the goal out 2 years, and then make them work really hard for it, and they probably won't ever get to it. Right. It'll just go away. It's a phase. Like I went to punk rock shows when I was a kid. I mean, I still do, but in those settings, right? There's dudes that are wearing a dress. There's females that will shave their head and they look like dude. Like I don't care about how an 18-year-old wants to live their life, right? It's like just give them space. They're rebelling. It won't be a big deal. But then they say, well, no, the teacher, right, put us in touch with the specialist, and it turns out that there's a treatment for this. So they're starting a regimen of hormones and and there's consideration of surgery down the road. At this point, my mouth's dropped, right?
And I guess they're saying, "Hey, we're just pausing." Maybe they're saying we're hitting pause, and so this whole debate is sad, but it's like, you don't want to say, well, there are people who say there's no such thing as transgender and it's just a misinterpretation of medical conditions, but people will say, oh, there's puberty blockers, which you can hit pause. And what about this idea that you hit pause until 18 and then and so is that maybe?
Let me just put this. Let me just address this kind of head on, right?
No.
So when I hear this, right, my thought is this is insanity, right? This is the thing. This is the thing I'm most conservative about. Like this is what made me be the conservative person in the room, was because I hear about the surgical transition, right, and I'm like, no, this is ridiculous. Yeah. When I was at USD, right, I remember I was there for undergraduate as well. And when I was studying psychology, we learned about what an institutional review board is, right? And if for your audience that's not familiar, an institutional review board is for any institution that does human subject experimentation. Even if you're giving a one-page questionnaire to a psychology 101 class, that questionnaire, if it's being used for research purposes, needs to be approved by an institutional review board, because if you're going to test a theory, that testing a theory is an experiment, right? And and running the experiment with human subjects qualifies as human subject experimentation, which means that should be reviewed by an institutional review board. I served on USD's institutional review board for 6 years because I did undergraduate and then I stuck on as the law school representative. So when I hear what's going on, I'm like, oh, what's the theory, right? Okay, well, the theory is that if you have a modification of your physical body, in particular, the alteration of hormones or the removal of genital tissue, that's the cost, right? There's a cost in physicality. There's physical cost, and the benefit purportedly is a reduction in suicidality over time and a reduction in metaphysical, psychological maladies, anxiety, depression, etc., over time, right?
Got it.
And I'm like, okay, so you have a theory, right? And you're going to test the theory, which is an experiment. And it was like, has the theory been tested, right? Show me the long-term data where you followed 1,000 or 2,000 people all the way to their death, and you can prove your statement about suicidality, right? Like, do they have a longer lifespan because they do this? Oh, you don't have that research. It's not there. Okay, that means you're doing the research now on the people who are currently doing it. People who are currently participating. That means you're doing human subject experimentation, it's possible to do controversial human subject experimentation, but you have to be honest with it. The crux of it is informed consent, meaning you have to provide real information, like you are participating in an experiment, and we don't know what the outcome is going to be. We don't know what's going to happen in 40 years. If you want to do this, you can, if you're an adult and you sign up for it. The gold standard in controversial human subject experimentation is the Minnesota starvation experiment. It occurred during World War II. So in World War II, when the Allies were getting close to winning, we realized that when the Axis powers eventually do fall, that the logistical supply chain that sends food to their tens of millions of citizens was going to break down, and they're going to have mass starvation. So in order to properly allocate limited resources, they wanted to know what's minimum caloric intake that we could be able to provide human beings before they go mad and start having like horrible consequences. So they went to they needed volunteers. And the reason why it's so controversial is the volunteers were going to receive no personal benefit from it whatsoever. Nothing. They were going to be taken to the brink of starvation death and then walked back just for research purposes on the theory that these people would sacrifice so millions of people that would otherwise die could be saved. But the emphasis with medicine is like do no harm. So what's the benefit that's going to come to these people? So even though these people were getting zero benefit, you could do it as long as you were honest with them about what they were signing up for. You couldn't tell them, no, this is an approved like affirmation study.
So you're saying in the medical ethics would be, hey, we can do a utilitarian philosophical approach here. The more people that benefit overall in some, it's okay, meaning you can harm these few people and bring them no benefit. So ultimately saying, hey, that's a utilitarian kind of approach.
Yes.
If the harmed group has informed consent.
If the participants know exactly the harm they're signing up for. It's like saying like your boxer getting into the ring, right? Do you know the harm that you're going to sign up for? Right? As long as you know, it's completely different. Then the people are assuming the risk. They're taking it on themselves. The problem is when you label it as, this is affirmation. Right? If the information that's providing is you, a biological male, can go through this procedure and then you'll become a biological female, well, then the information that you're providing to the person is false. false. And then without proper information, you don't have consent. And if you don't have consent, you start to get to a very, very dark place. And people forget why we have the rules, right? So in World War II, right, it's funny because everybody throws the Nazi thing around, and we really should be having a discussion is not so much the Nazis, right, but the experimentation, the medical experimentation, the atrocious medical experimentation that took place by the Nazis included a lot of medical professionals that were not themselves Nazis. They were sucked into the social mania, the following of orders. They became part of the experimentation process. So in response to that, the worldwide medical community, psychological community, said, we have to study this. Was there something unique about the German people that made them go along with this? Or is this something inherent in human beings? And that's why they promulgated the Nuremberg Code, which said that if you're going to engage in human subject experimentation, this was our Bible, quote unquote Bible, when we were on the Institutional Review Board, was if you're going to engage in human subject experimentation, informed consent is the bedrock principle. Everything that we did when we were on the boards was what information is being provided. And this was for a 3-page written questionnaire for a psychology class. This isn't even talking about permanent genital removal of genitals, right? So anyway, so that Nuremberg Code gets established after World War II. Minnesota starvation experiment precedes the Nuremberg Code because the war was still ongoing at the time. But those two things were near in time, that the ethics of both the ethics of that time period were reflected in both. Fast forward to 1949, right? In 1949, the Nobel Prize was awarded for frontal lobotomies, okay? Frontal lobotomies, now let's do this very similar analytical approach. Like, what's the theory? The theory is that if you damage some otherwise healthy brain tissue, that you will see a reduction in suicidality over time. You will see a reduction in metaphysical, psychological maladies like anxiety, depression, hyperactivity over time, right? If you replace brain tissue with genital tissue, there are parallels with the type of research, experimentation that's going on. It even won the Nobel Prize in 1949, right? It was a social mania that had gripped the high society, so much so that present candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., right, his aunt, his not youngest aunt, but JFK's youngest sister, was lobotomized in 1941, and she was in a near vegetative state for the rest of her life. Like, that's how common things were.
Right.
And then from there, you have like the Tuskegee experiments, which didn't finish until the late 70s, right? Your parents were probably alive when the Tuskegee experiments finished out, where they intentionally gave people syphilis and then refused to treat them and gave them false information because they were in asylums, so they weren't fully people, even though the health care that was provided to the white like quote unquote participants, subjects, was different. Like, the medical care that was provided to the white subjects, human subjects, was actually in compliance with Nuremberg Code, if I remember correctly. But the ones provided to the African American people were not. So there was treating individuals who were in asylums like they weren't people, like the Nuremberg Code didn't apply at all, and then differentiating a layer of racism into that. Like this is like hardcore racism, right? It's
Yeah. It doesn't get much more racist than that.
Yeah, they're already not people, and now you're declining them even the most basic healthcare. It's nuts, the stuff that we tolerate.
Yeah.
And then you've got MK Ultra testing psychedelics on like the public without any form of the people don't really understand the history of what types of atrocities follow from diluting the minimum ethical guidelines of the Nuremberg Code, right? It's like, if we're going to prevent these atrocities from occurring again, and these are some of the most horrific things that we have in recorded history, The only chance to do that is to say that you cannot conduct human subject experimentation unless it's to the at least bare minimum ethics of the Nuremberg Code. And we don't do that anymore.
It's an amazing in-depth analysis of this problem or conundrum or issue, I should say, with how to treat children who are gender dysphoric or trans, however you want to say, whatever's appropriate. But also, who knew that it was such an important issue generally in American society? Because you'll have so many African Americans obviously saying, no, the government is bad, and look at the Tuskegee experiments and all of this. So it's who knew that this was such an important issue in American society? I appreciate all of that. And it kind of highlights, well, especially with the trans issue, this whole Alex Jones concept of it's team humanity versus something else. And so, what do you think about that guy, Alex Jones, and these claims about aliens and suppressed technology? Let's just have a little fun for a minute here, because this really is with the theme of like there's an anti-human force, or with AI. So do you think there is an anti-human force on this planet, whether it be AI or some sort of advanced beings? I mean, there's a whole lot of people who think that human beings are not not at the top of the food chain. It's a really fun place to get lost. And for me, it's I mean, obviously an important part of the equation. I mean, shit. I mean, if if human beings are not the most intelligent creatures on this planet, then that'd be pretty profound and probably affect my search for political identity and seeking truth. So what do you think about this Alex Jones character generally and his followers, and this idea that there's a team humanity and a team not humanity?
So let me answer that on a couple different levels. Like, one, I can honestly say I've never seen Alex Jones' show.
I thought you were going to say that you never saw an alien.
I haven't, but never seen Alex Jones, right? So
Same here, actually.
So being able to comment on him specifically is just a little bit just kind of outside my wheelhouse, because my understanding of him is that he's been right on a bunch of stuff and then just way wrong on a bunch of stuff, and I wouldn't be able to say where like the delineating factor is, right? My general thought process is not so much that that human beings are the most intelligent things on the planet, right? It's I see I see the same life force that flows between you and me, right? Or that flows between me, flows between you, and flows between all humanity, and also flows between like other different types of sentient creatures as well. Right, like this is just my general conception of viewing the world. Like, this is after my overview effect of seeing the planet. I see everybody as interconnected by a common, essentially synaptic activity. Right, like the more synaptic activity, the more you are in tune with whatever this energy actually is. Right, some people might call it the Holy Spirit. Star Wars might call it the Force, but like there is this.
Modern science might call it consciousness.
Consciousness, right? Is there like an AI like overlord messing with the human race, right? Like HAL 3000 or something to that effect? Like I've never seen any evidence to suggest that this is the case. My life experience has. I do believe that there are a group of human beings on the planet that believe that we have too many human beings on the planet. Right. It's like I do believe, and I believe that they're powerful, they're more influential. These are more like the George Soros types, right? And it's like there's like a golden billion, right? Where some people speak of, where they think that the optimal amount of humans on the planet would be 1 billion, right? We have 9 billion, or we're on our way to 9 billion, right? So it's if that's true that you want 1 billion, how are you gonna get there? Right. Like, do I think that that's from aliens? Do I think it's from AI? No, I think it's from human beings who are going out in public and saying it out loud. Right. They're doing what they can to disincentivize human reproduction. Right. And on that scale, right, you really have like Elon Musk on one of the scales that's talking about how we really have birth rate decline issues. We're going to have situations where we have way too many older people than we have capacity to care for them. And also, if you have an extra 1 billion people, the chances of you having another Einstein, a Steve Jobs, a Tchaikovsky come out of there are higher, right? So it kind of depends on your perception of how the world progresses in advancement.
And if we have abundance, people have said if you have an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset.
Yep.
So There are plenty of smart people that I've come into contact with who think that we definitely have enough resources. So makes you wonder if they're correct, and if they're
Well,
correct,
we throw away like 1 billion meals a day
right,
as a world, right? We may not efficiently distribute those to every human being on the planet, so there could be places where people are starving, like absolutely. But the solution isn't to scale back the entire global population by 80%. Usually, if you're looking at it systemically from the globe, it's like, where's the people that there's mass starvation? Well, if you zoom into that place like Google Maps, you'll find that the country is usually pretty screwed up, and that the supply routes are inefficient because of socialist or authoritarian tendencies of the state. Um, so yeah, it's
okay,
um, but
that's
no AI
right,
and aliens, just human beings that genuinely believe, and I think they genuinely believe this in their soul, is that they think that the world would be a better place if 75% of the world didn't, if 75% of human beings didn't exist,
right,
and the what is it, the flaw in their plan, or the part that they never explain, is how they're going to get from step one to step two. And there's not really a way to do that that's not genocidal.
right. Yeah, it's that's pretty terrifying. It's
That's
that I mean, forget the aliens and the AI. I mean, it's still terrifying.
Mhm.
Yeah. So let's go back to the real world for a second.
Yep.
You said your parents are immigrants. What are your thoughts on America's immigration system? Should just hit me with it.
So again, and this is one of the things which is where I'm as post-tribal as they come, right? We can get into why in a second, but the actually, let me get into this first, and I'll get back, and we'll answer your question on immigration, right?
Okay.
So my congressional run started in 2022. I ran into the 2022 cycle because in my hometown district, which is California 31, the Republicans didn't field a candidate at all. Our incumbent was 85 years old,
Mm,
probably knows very little about AI, was born when Snow White was in the theater, right?
right.
And so by that point, I had been working with a group of veteran Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and PTSD, traumatic brain injury, suicide mitigation. So I had a person, my dad committed suicide in 2015. And
Mm,
so I started working with these, over the years, I started working with these guys, and you start to learn about the 22 a day veteran suicide rate.
mm,
And then you start to think, like, why is it that you guys have to go down to cartel infested Mexico for you to get treatment that should be available at the VA, the building that we have 1,100 of and strategically placed around the U.S. You guys can get top level medical care and psychological care, right? So I told them, right, I'll run for office in my home district, right? The lady in there crushed the last guy by 40 points, right? But it's not healthy for a country to have somebody run unopposed. So I'll just go around there and I'll just talk about bring issues to the veteran suicide, like the protocols that could lead to a reduction in veteran suicide, right? Nobody hates that, right? I'll just go doing that. And then I ended up closing out the race within 9 points of the finish line, right? When I went to sign up when I went to pick up my packet, they reminded me that I wasn't a Republican, right? Like they said that I was a registered libertarian, which I was. Like I've been libertarian independent for 10 years. The only
okay.
two candidates I've ever supported with time or money were Ron Paul in 2012 and Tulsi Gabbard in 2020.
Okay.
And so then, so I went, but either way, so it's California. So California, you don't have to ask the party for permission. So I said, how do I change from libertarian to Republican? They said, you sign this piece of paper. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And they said, and then I go around, you collect 40 signatures. That's it. 40 signatures. And then you pay the filing fee and you're on the ballot. The fact that there's any open seats is really an indictment of our education system.
Right.
And like the fact that so few people really care. So either way, so I don't raise any money because I don't ask for any money. It's not like it's 40, like the last guy got crushed by 40%. It was 67-33. I wasn't expecting to win or even really get close. But then I end up closing the final race within 9 points, right? Just because just because I have a message that's non-ideological, really. And so then 6 months later, Grace announces that she's retiring. So since she's retiring, now it's an open seat, which is relatively rare. There's 435 seats in Congress. Now this one's an open seat, and I am the one that, and I was actually on the ballot the year before, the cycle before, which is even more rare, because now my name recognition is technically above almost everybody who's going to be on the ballot.
Mm.
So the most controversial interview that I had last time around was in May of 2022, when the local newspaper, local San Gabriel Valley Tribune, called me to do what did the candidates think about the issues, and they asked me about Ukraine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they said they asked the two Democrats that were running, like, do you think that Biden should send more guns and weapons to Ukraine? It's like, yeah, he's doing a great job. He should send more. And then he asks me, and I'm like, it's a disaster. Like, we should aim towards peace, like towards mitigating loss of human life and mitigating loss of damage to infrastructure. The Ukrainian people are getting destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
It was the last time any media outlet, newspaper, would speak to me. Because at the time, blue and yellow flags everywhere.
Right. Yeah. Peak.
Yeah. So then, this 6 months after the election, Grace announced that she's retiring. I put my papers in with the Federal Election Commission just to let everybody know I was going to do this again. And then over the next couple of months, Joe Biden's Undersecretary of Defense for Preparedness and Readiness decided to leave DC, retire from the position, and then move to my district where he didn't have any roots, just so he could run for office, which seemed a bit odd. And then the Republicans who didn't take the race seriously last time around found a 30-year retiring Army colonel. Again, hadn't had roots in the district for 30 years, but chose my district to retire. Those two guys had in common that they both wanted to keep sending $100 billion to Ukraine.
Gotcha.
And then state senator, one of the local state senators ran, another state senator ran, and the Democrats ended up spending $7 million on the race. Mainly because the Undersecretary of Defense, Gil Cisneros, he won the lottery in 2010.
Oh, he literally won the lottery.
Yeah, before that he worked at like Frito-Lay's factory. And then he won
How
the
lucky
lottery.
can one guy be?
Yeah, he won like 260 million. So then he spent it. He spent 10 million to win a race in Orange County. There was a sexual abuse allegation that came up. He got ousted from Congress afterwards, and then and then Biden rewards him by making him Undersecretary of Defense for the United States military. And his specific focus is implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the military. Right, like that.
Right.
Because that's the most important thing for the military to be focused on, right?
Right.
So, but yeah, so he ends up winning, right? He ends up stepping on all the other Democrats, even though the other Democrats have local ties, and he's not even from the district.
Right.
He ends up making it through because he's got the money to grease all the wheels, and there's 10 people in the primary. I didn't have any money, or the thing is, I don't ask people for money unless I think there's a reasonable chance that there can be a success. And there's 10 people in the race with 2 slots, and there's 2. So I just did the campaigning on my own, speaking to people, glad handing, and then the people remembered me from last year. So I ended up making it out second. The GOP ended up endorsing, because the GOP was pissed off with me for doing this last time around. Like I thought they would have been happy that they had somebody that was willing to put their scarlet R next to their name.
Right.
And they weren't at all. They were like, who are you and why are you here? And this is about money for us. That's what it really comes down to. Right. So they would rather lose and deal with a Democrat that plays the game than have to reform from within.
That's extremely interesting.
So when they end up even though I was their candidate last time around, they end up endorsing the colonel, the neoconservative who wants to send $100 billion more to Ukraine. So, but either way, I beat him, got out of the primary, and then so that kind of takes us up to the present.
This is all this month.
Yeah.
On Super Tuesday, right?
Well, the New York Times didn't call the race until about 2 weeks afterwards.
Okay.
But I just wanted to lay that foundation for I could not be more independent than either political party. Like if you look at my logo, right? It's red circle with blue circle.
Yes, exactly. You cannot figure out what you are politically by your website.
Well, then the thing is, and part of it is that it's not like you can figure out what I am through the website.
Right, but you have to read the policy.
Well, and you also, so that logo.
You're not tribal. That's what you can figure out.
That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
I'm post-tribal because that logo I sketched out on a piece of paper before I decided to run, right? And it had several influences, right? Like the greatest line Barack Obama ever delivered was, "We're not red states, we're not blue states, we're the United States of America," right in the middle. It's also my philosophy, which is that when I speak to constituent Democrats and I speak to constituent Republicans, which is terminology I use to differentiate them from the nut jobs who are in DC, right? Both sides have nut jobs. When I speak to constituent Democrats and constituent Republicans, they agree on 80% or 90% of the issues that need to be solved, right? If I say, do you think that veteran suicide is a problem? Both sides say yes. Do you think homelessness is a problem? Both sides say yes. Do you think crime is a problem? Both sides say yes. Do you want better education? Both sides say yes, right? There's not disagreement on this, right? The disagreement comes from, now that we've identified the issue, what's the solution that's presented?
Is it more free market or is it more government?
Well, and this is the way I call it is it red solution or blue solution? And when I hear this, I'm like, well, both of them are stupid because that's not how you solve problems, right? So take school shootings, for example, right? Because there's none really that are on in the horizon right now, so not emotional. We can talk about it.
Sure.
You have a school shooting, comes down to a horrible tragedy, right? Everybody agrees something needs to be done about it, right? Then you're presented with red and blue solution. What's red solution?
Metal detectors, police.
Make the schools more like prisons.
Right. Harden them.
Yeah, make them more like prisons, right? Which is, I believe, atrocious. It's part of like the classical liberal.
You see the swiveling doors with the safety.
Yeah, it makes me sad when I drive by a school and it looks like a prison. And I'm a criminal defense attorney that goes to prisons, right? It's like this is not okay. It's not optimal learning environment. You have there's no color, there's no creativity. You're treating them like they're inmates.
Right.
So I'm not a fan of that, even if I have the R next to my name. Well, then you go to the Democrat side, and it's like, oh, well, we're gonna make some more rules. We're gonna make some rules. Well, but no, they're not even saying we're gonna take away the guns, right? They're saying we're gonna change these different rules to close a loophole about gun purchases at a gun show, when the vast majority of the people get them from inside the house, right? You can't take them away. Right, so you have nonsense solution over here, and nonsense solution over here, but if you had a classical liberal education, how do you fix a problem, right? If I present you a mathematics problem, does it matter? Is there a red solution or a blue solution?
Right.
No, the solution stems from the problem itself, and so if you focus that way, you can fix the problem, whether it's homelessness or any of the other ones. And so you asked specifically about immigration, right? So let me end.
You're saying we've lost the ability to be objective.
Yes, 100%. That's my thing.
And that's what so many people that I've talked to, many libertarians, some conservatives, that's just for whatever reason, the majority of people that I've connected with, they say, yeah, this decadence that we're indulging in as a society, this melding of philosophy and culture with classical education core curriculum has just eliminated our ability to see truth clearly. And so now go on to immigration, sir.
But that's really what it is. It's like it's like I don't feel like I'm a Republican going against Democrats, right? I feel like I'm a member of my community that was born here, raised here, went to the grade school that I went to is in my district, the Catholic high school I graduated in my district.
And everyone's losing their mind around you.
And yeah, exactly. And I feel like everyone's like, they're destroying the education system. Like, we need a functional education system to produce future generations of people that know how to keep bridges up and skyscrapers up. Like, this isn't a game.
Right.
Like, I don't understand. Like, people are going to die from this. Like, this is not something. This is not something where you just win. You can just you win.
You don't win automatically.
No, it's like, haha, we crushed the other person, so now we're making it so children believe that they can cut off their genitals. Well, like, okay, you won, but what did you do? You sound like the Aztec Indians. Like, this is bizarre. And also, what the hell's wrong? Like, who when I was a kid, right? When I started to feel like mold, right? But when I was a kid, right, if somebody, like they taught us in school that when you're like 11 or 12, if somebody came up to you and said, hey, are you feeling sad? Do you feel like your outside doesn't really reflect your inside? Do you feel like you're highly anxious? Well, and then they open up their jacket, right? And they're like, you should try this tea, right? It's this new tea. If you just take a little injection of it, you'll feel great, right?
Mm.
That used to be something we warned people from. Because if, like, you know, if you and I took a testosterone shot, we'd feel great. Like for 24 hours or 72
Right.
hours, or whatever
Right.
the time is. Like our anxiety levels would go down.
Right.
We'd do better. We'd overperform at the gym. We'd be like,
Right. That ties into this critique of masculinity.
yep. Well, but also, if you add that, the tea makes everybody feel great, and then you tell them if you feel great when you take this, it means it's working. It means you know you're in the wrong gender. Well, now you're getting even worse down the logical fallacies that people are building their reputation on, right?
Mm.
And then the other thing is just like, as a student of philosophy over 20 years, your internal soul, right? Your internal identity is as close to infinite as we can imagine. Your physical body is finite. Those two concepts are separate. The duality of man. There's not a single person on the planet who genuinely believes that the outside of their physical meat shield is an accurate reflection of the complexity of what goes on inside their internal soul.
Mm.
Inside your soul is part of your mother and part of your father and your grandparents and
Right.
on both sides, right? To say that like you don't have any of your mother in your soul because you have a biological male body is not
Right.
true.
That's a
So
fascinating point.
what I'm watching when I see these conversations with kids is complex philosophy discussions.
Yeah, and they're saying we don't have access to that higher self.
Yeah, but that's what they're saying. They're like, well, no, I want my outside to reflect my inside. It's like, yeah, but that's not going to happen, no matter what. You have to accept that. And instead
And
of
I thought you
telling
were
them,
saying also, like, we focus on depression because, Andrew Tate will say depression doesn't exist.
yeah,
But there is something to say about, hey, man, we don't exercise anymore. We don't move anymore.
yeah.
So many reasons why things just seem upside down.
Well, and then there's also like there's your natural like the average human being cycles through all of their emotions like something like 8 to 16 times a day or something like that, right? Average teenager cycles through all of their emotions something like 24 to 36 times a day, which is why they seem bananas to adults because they're just like they're
Cycling
switching,
faster.
they're just switching faster than the rest of them are. But if your mom dies, or your dog dies, or your child dies, you're supposed to be depressed. That's
Right.
like to say that there's something wrong with that feeling is horrible. Because then when people feel that way, it gets compounded by the idea that they shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah.
But you should feel that way. What you should do when you feel that way? Get up in the morning. Go
Right.
to work. It's not this is where it's like I'm not on Tate's side where it's like, oh, depression doesn't exist. No, it does exist. It doesn't exist the way that like you're going to sit in bed for 2 weeks and you're going to have people go and be like, oh, poor baby, right? Like that shouldn't exist, right? But it should be like it's like you should feel
It's okay
sad.
to feel
Yeah,
badly. That's part of life, but we need more resiliency, and we're
exactly.
lacking resiliency. Maybe that's the point.
Exactly. That's a good focus because we are coddling people. We're making them soft.
Right.
We're
Right.
saying you have an excuse now to cancel all of your responsibilities
Right.
that you didn't want to do anyway.
There is no such thing as core curriculum. Don't
Yeah.
worry if you don't understand it. There is
Yeah.
no such thing as physical fitness. Don't worry if you don't have it.
Yeah. And there could be nothing more poisonous to be able to infuse into the people who are receiving that message. Right.
Yeah.
And this is where, again, this is where I ended up like, quote unquote, the most conservative guy in the room, because it's like all of a sudden it's like, oh, I actually don't understand this conversation. It's like, I understand this philosophical conversation you're trying to talk about. Right. Like, Two-Spirit, right? You've heard of that? Everybody
Yes.
mocks
A
Two-Spirit.
little bit. Yeah.
Yes, well, but it's a quote unquote gender according to these nut jobs, right? So my great grandfather is 100% Native American. Okay, I've got 12%. So I actually understand where Two Spirit comes from, right? And you remember what I was describing before about the infinite soul,
Yes.
right? And how you have the spirit of your mother and the spirit of your father in there with you.
Yep.
That's Two Spirit. It's not a gender. It's not. It doesn't refer to your meat shield.
Gotcha.
It doesn't refer to your meat suit. It refers to the internal state of you as having different spirits in there. The spirit of your mother, the spirit of your father, the spirit of
It's
your
not
grandfather.
this idea that your meat shield is supposed to mirror that.
Exactly, that doesn't exist. Like that's just like it's the worst type of liberal white people stealing, misappropriating cultures from Native American cultures
That's
that they
fascinating,
don't
actually.
understand, and they're just using it to reinforce the point they wanted to make anyway.
Yeah.
And
That's
that
amazing.
it's like it's like it's just bizarre to process because it violates even the rules they claim to believe, right? Like that you're not supposed to culturally
Right.
appropriate. You're not supposed to
And it
like.
makes you wonder if there isn't a malicious intent there because it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I mean, I always like I do criminal defense work, so I try to stay away from attributing malicious intent that could
Oh,
easily be attributed.
hold on. We just had a communication break, but you're back. Yeah, you stay away from attributing malicious intent.
And I stay away from attributing a malicious intent to any situation that could be attributed to ignorance or
Right.
incompetence.
Fair enough.
And so it's like I just try to stay away from that space because I very much try to stay humble and only comment on the things that I know. I happen to be well read, and I know there's like everything that I've said in this conversation has been mostly factual statements from history and my
Sure.
personal opinions, right?
Right.
I don't think it's necessary to go beyond that. The stuff that we have, like what's going on right now at present, is sufficiently disturbing,
Right.
right? And here's another thing, right? So I work with. One of the other groups that I work with are indigenous, like ayahuascan tribes, right? Like indigenous Indians in the rainforest that use ayahuasca for their spiritual conception of reality, so they can speak with their ancestral spirits, so to speak. Like I'm actually a subject matter expert on this two spirit stuff, right?
Right. Perfect.
It's irritating to me when I see this because it's like you can't have these discussions with children. I mean, you can't even have these discussions with most graduate students.
Right.
But the
That's
idea that
that's bad.
it's just bizarre. You're teaching children a concept that you don't even understand,
Right.
and
And
that
it's really harmful.
they're incapable of understanding, and the end result is that more children have their genitals cut off. Like we're incentivizing cutting off children's genitals.
Mm.
Like, and some people are like, oh, how often does it happen? It only happens like a couple thousand times a year. Like, well, that's a couple thousand times a year. Like even by
Yeah.
your own
Right.
admission.
Right.
Like it's why we would normalize this, say it's okay. It's just like and again, I'm the guy who like I don't give a damn if you're
Right.
gay.
You're at Burning Man.
Like, yeah, I'm at Burning Man, right? That's why I have to keep going back to that. Right? It's like,
Right.
look, my favorite band is NoFX, punk rock band.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Fat Mike got married to his recent dominatrix wife, and he was the one that wore the wedding dress. She wore the tuxedo to their wedding, right? NoFX's final tour is this year. They're finally calling it quits.
How warped does our society have to be where you're the most conservative guy in the room?
That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
It's like why what is it that like what is it that I'm not
Missing.
what is it that I'm missing here, right?
Right.
I think the conservative thing to do abroad would be to aim towards minimizing loss of life, like in foreign policy, aim to minimize loss of life and infrastructure, like damage, right? Our adventurous foreign policy is just too much. We need to scale it back. We need to get back to reality. It has nothing to do with me for ideology, right? As far as
Right.
I'm concerned, the
Right. It's
only thing that
reality.
objective reality.
Yes. Yes.
That's
Yep.
all that matters to me.
Yeah.
It's like I just want to know that like I just want to be taking incremental steps to be getting us to a better place. Everybody wants that.
Yes.
Like on, it's like the sad thing is that when you have education be like a fight between unions and like social conservatives that want to turn them all into Christian schools, right?
Right.
It's like, that's not what we need. But what we do need are people that understand mathematics.
Right. We're battling. Our schools and public institutions have become a battle of ideas rather than a place to understand truth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Daniel, can we take a 30-second break and come back and maybe do another 10, 15 minutes? I want to ask you about, or are you timed out?
Actually, I am timed out because I'm going
Gotcha.
about 15 minutes over. However,
Gotcha.
I would like, why don't we call this part one, and then we'll schedule a part two, because
I would love
like,
that.
I appreciate our dialogue going back and forth. I did promise that we would start this by me explaining to your dad what you brought your father-in-law.
Yeah.
Why? And this is,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna close on this then, right?
Go ahead, please.
What's your father-in-law's name?
Joel.
Joel.
His girlfand's dad. Girlfriend's dad.
Okay.
Yeah.
Girlfriend, right.
Joel.
So, but yeah, I mean, Joel, right? Like the reason why I reached out to Brian to be on the show, because one, we have an alumni connection, and two, this gives me an opportunity to fully flesh out my ideas in a way that I don't have access to, because of the fact that I got blacklisted last time around. There's not a lot of time. It's like you need to be able to have, like, as a candidate who's not coming from the major parties, who doesn't have access to their information amplification networks. I need to have it's helpful for me to have an opportunity to be able to explore these ideas in a way that then allows me to be able to crop them into smaller pieces, right? It's like you are an essential part of the political process if we like to break that two-party system, right?
It's amazing. I'm an incubator for candidates who are trying to do that. That is, I just got chills because I feel like that's a purpose that I'm serving that I really wanted to tap into. That's really cool.
And that's what means so much to me about this, Brian. So let's definitely do this again. If I don't leave now, my wife's going to kill me. But
thank you so much for your time, man. It's been an amazing conversation, and I'm definitely looking forward to the next one. Good luck to you, sir.
Talk soon, Brian. Have a good one.
Adios, man. Thank you.
Bye.